What is going on, guys? Joab here. Welcome to another story time video. This is kind of a rough one, kind of a sad one. It might be a little bit long, but it's going to be good anyways, I believe. I think it's going to be a good story time. It's not going to be good emotionally, but it's going to be a nice story to listen to. Sorry about the lighting. The lighting may pulse in the background. You may see the lighting pulse throughout this video. I'm sitting next to a window, and I thought this is a pretty aesthetic spot to record some videos. So yeah, we're going to get into, as you see by the title of the video, we're going to get into a story, what cancer is like. And this is an outside perspective. This is from my perspective watching my grandfather die of cancer. And this isn't, I'm not going to give out any names. I want to say like my dad and my grandpa, sister, but I'm not going to give out any names just for security reasons, just because I don't want people to harp on them if they find their Facebook or whatever, you know, just reasons, just for security. So story time. What it's like to view cancer from an outside perspective. And I'm not going to cry during this video. It's not going to be, it is very emotional, but, you know, this happened a long, long time ago. So not really over it, but, you know, tears aren't coming as much or if at all. So watching my grandfather die of cancer. Now, first off, I was close to him, but not as close as I wanted to be. And what I mean by that is, you know, I'd visit him on and off, but it was a rarity because I was in school, I was a little kid. And I remember when I was younger, though, when I was about 5 years old, I went sledding with him down my uncle's house because my uncle and my grandpa used to live right next to each other. If you know, if you could back up 300 yards, their houses were like this close to each other, perspective-wise. And I remember going sledding at my uncle's house, which again, what I said was right next to my grandpa's house. He lived right next door out in the country in Danville. And I remember sledding down a little hill with my grandpa, and that was always fun. And my grandpa was a great cook. You know, when I was 5, 6, he used to cook me some things when I went over there with my uncle. But I didn't visit much, and my time visiting him drastically decreased over the years because just life happens. And you know, everything was fine. We'd visit him. He'd always come up for Thanksgiving or he'd always come up for Christmas, and you'd always see him sitting there at the dinner table in his same spot, same chair, drink the same drinks, eat the same food, like the same things. He was stuck in his ways, which was a good thing. You know, a lot of times you'll hear someone say you're stuck in your ways, and that might be a bad thing. But it was a good thing because, you know, his ways were nice. He didn't bug anyone, didn't hurt anyone. Wasn't a mean person, was very religious and a loving, caring grandpa, so that's all you could ask for. And he used to come up for Thanksgiving all the time. He used to come up for Christmas all the time. He'd come to my house sometimes. That was a rarity, but he'd come to my house to see my dad, and see me, and see my sister. That was fun. That was fun, and everything was normal. Everything was normal, and everything was fine up until I think 2010. And at 2010, that was 9 years ago. Yeah, that was 9 years ago. And I remember something happened. And it wasn't good. It wasn't good at all. I remember what happened was one day, I think I was out of school. I think it was a Friday, and I was out of school, and it was the weekend, so I had the weekend to do whatever I wanted. And my dad got a phone call that my grandpa was driving around, and suddenly he got lost. Just got lost out of the blue. And that wasn't fun. He got lost, and he was driving around, and nobody could find him. You know, we notified the police station. We notified Indianapolis police, and I think I was out of school, and I went up to my aunt's house. I was at my aunt's house with my cousin. You know, by now you should know, if you watch my videos regularly, that I used to do a lot of videos with my cousin. And so I was up there at my aunt's house, and I was just sitting on the couch. I think I was eating something, and she got a call. My dad got a call, but I don't think I was there for that call at the house. I think I was actually there with my aunt in 2010 at their house, and she got a call that Grandpa went missing, and nobody knew why. He just went missing. You know, he was driving around, and he couldn't find his way back home, and he didn't have a cell phone with him. He didn't have any sort of communication with him, on him, when he was driving around, so no phone, no cell phone, nothing. It was just him and his truck, and we had to rely on reaching out to people, reaching out to gas stations, reaching out to the police, the news, which my uncle was a cameraman for the news at that time, and he still does that to this day. So we had easy connections with the news, and You may have seen it if you live in Indiana, because that's where the reports was spread out. If you live in Indiana or near Indianapolis, you may have seen a report in 2010 for a missing elderly man, my grandpa. And so they were looking around for him, and they couldn't find him. And I think it was, I forget how long he was gone. I think it was a day or two. At most, it was 2 days. But he was gone for 2 days, and my whole family was panicking. Everyone was panicking and looking for him. We drove around. I remember we drove around for 1, 2, maybe 3 hours. I remember doing that with my 2 aunts and my grandma and my cousin. We got in one of their vehicles and we just started driving around because we didn't know where he was. We were going to look. We looked everywhere. We looked in Greenwood, Plainfield, Indianapolis, some other areas in Indiana, but not too far out. And everyone was looking. My dad was looking. My 2 aunts were looking. My grandma was looking. Everyone was looking for him. I couldn't drive at the time because I was 11 years old. But it wasn't fun. It really, really, really wasn't fun. And you know, a day went by, and he might have been back a day later. But I know there was at least some part of that day, the next day, where he was still gone. He didn't come the next morning. But you know, he just was driving around and suddenly got lost. Couldn't remember where he was. Couldn't remember what he was doing. Couldn't remember how to get home. He just suddenly just forgot. And so the night went by, and we slept through the night, and it was a very worrisome night. And we woke up, still wasn't home. And then I think there was another day that went by, or it might have been that day. That the next day, it might have been just one day he was gone. I don't really remember, but he was found back at his home. My dad was driving around. My dad happened to be driving around and went to his house just to check if he was there, and he was there. Now, he was missing. He was driving around for some bit of time. He was lost. He was driving around. He was lost, didn't know where he was. He was driving around just randomly. He did not know where he was. He suddenly just, like that, just forgot. And my dad happened to be driving past his house, and he saw him there. He saw his truck there. He saw my grandpa sitting on the porch. So he was just mind blown. He's like, why is he back here? Wasn't he lost? So he goes up to the porch where my grandpa's sitting. My grandpa's smoking, just smoking his cigars, and didn't really remember that he was lost. And my dad's like, Dad, you were missing. How'd you find your way back? And then my uncle came there. Everyone in the family, I remember, came back. I remember it. And then we drove down, because I was still up there with my 2 aunts and my grandma and my cousin. We all drove down, and then other people that lived 40 minutes away, an hour away in the family, drove down. Everyone drove down to see him, and I remember my uncle took his keys away and said in a rude way, you're not getting these back. He dangled them in front of his face. And I'm not going to give out any names for personal protection or identity reasons, but he grabbed his keys, dangled them in front of his face, and rudely told my grandpa that you're not getting these back, because he didn't want to drive again. So what my uncle did eventually was, later on through that week or day or whatever, he would put up he put up stickers and laminated paper inside the truck on the little mirrors that you can pull down mirrors, and on the floorboard that says, if lost, call this number. He gave my grandpa a phone, even though he said he wasn't going to drive again. He eventually did let him. He gave him a cell phone. He put numbers and laminated paper all in the truck, so if he got lost again, he would know who to call. And I remember one person in the family talked to a person at a gas station that my grandpa actually encountered when he was lost, and he said that he asked where he was because he didn't know where he was, my grandpa, and the guy tried to give him the best directions that he could, and I think that's ultimately what led him back home. But he didn't remember. My grandpa did not remember being lost. That's a sign of something, that's a mental issue. That's something mental, that something in his brain wasn't working right, and being like the age I was, I realized that cancer was a thing. I realized that dementia was a thing, but I didn't really know that was what it was. You know, I'm a little kid. I usually think of the brighter, better things. But eventually he found his way home, and when my dad found him home, they looked inside his truck, and he had beer cans in there too. He was drinking and just forgot everything. So then the years went by, and he never really forgot where to go again. He never really got lost again, but he would have more trouble finding how to get somewhere. You know, he'd go to my grandma's house all the time, and then suddenly he forgot. He wouldn't necessarily forget. He'd just have a harder time getting there. So he never truly forgot how to get somewhere or where to go again. He just had a harder time getting there. So eventually years went by, and I forget if he was showing any like sort of sick symptoms, like if he was sick at all, but one day my uncle or my dad, I forget which one, noticed that his eye started to turn inwards. Kind of like when you cross your eyes, you see him cross my eyes. One of his eyes was doing that. It just was one. The one was straight, one was going inwards. And it shocked the whole family. We didn't know what was going on. So, I think prior to that, prior to his eye turning in, my uncle took him to the hospital, just did not say anything to anyone, or knew that something was going on, just didn't tell anyone, which is a terrible thing to do. I mean, the sooner you catch something, the better. And eventually, through testing and looking at his eye and his eye turning in and looking at all these symptoms, taking him to the hospital, they figured out that he had a tumor inside of his head. And I think it was benign. I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. But whatever it was growing, and it was pushing on his optic nerve, causing his eye to turn in. Just one of them. And it got so bad to where it looked like he had like he was crossing one eye, looking at his nose, and it just kept getting worse and worse, and his memory got worse and worse. And I forget where the cancer was first found, but ultimately they did find cancer somewhere, and from then on out, it was just downhill. It was just absolutely downhill. I remember he was sick all the time, and then one time it just got so bad to the point where we had to stay the night at my uncle's house, which, like I said, was right. They were neighbors right across from my grandpa's house, with my aunt and my sister. We stayed the night at my uncle's house. My uncle couldn't be there. He was haunted by, I guess, hiding it from the family, and he just didn't want to be there because the memories, like just knowing that he had cancer, just not being around him, but I don't know what it was. He just did not want to be at his house. So we were staying there, and we kept an eye on him. And we at nighttime we would just stare at the house from my uncle's house, the little brick house that my grandpa lived in. And we would stare at that house to make sure he's okay. And we'd see him walking through the night. It was kind of creepy. With a flashlight. You'd see the light move across the window, and it turned pitch black, and then you see it like flash in the window. It's like a horror movie. It was really creepy. I don't know what he was doing, but we had to keep tabs on him. And eventually it got so bad, the cancer got so bad to where we had to put him in hospice, and he was taken care of in his home. And that's when it really went downhill. That is when it really, really, really went downhill. The family was coming out all the time. The people that lived an hour away were coming down every day. They were staying the night. Everyone in the family was down at his house, and we literally watched him die. The people in hospice took the best care they could. They had him on oxygen, and he wasn't skinny from the cancer. He didn't lose much weight. He wasn't fat, but he was still a normal, healthy-sized old man, and it was haunting. It was absolutely haunting to watch him die of cancer. And you see what it does to people. And you see how it destroys them. He didn't want to eat. He just didn't want to eat. He ate less day after day after day, and eventually just started eating at the very end of his life, just the yogurt and a lot of liquids, not even a lot of solid foods. He just couldn't handle it. The pain was everywhere. And the cancer spread so fast. I remember they said he had about a month to live, and then it went from 2 weeks, and it went to like 2 days. And there was a room in his house. It was when you walk down the hallway, the first room to the right. He would lay on that bed, and he would scream in pain. My uncle would stay the night with my grandpa all the time through his last weeks and months, and would apologize to him for everything he did, and wanted to know that he loved them. And as religious as my grandpa was, he said, "It's all right, Lord's going to take care of me." And it didn't last too long. The pain did not last too long. But he went through a bunch of it. He really, really did. And he would lay in that bed, and he would just writhe in pain, and he would scream and cry and curse. He would not cuss. The man was a man of the God. The man, he was a man of God, and you never hear him cuss, but he was cussing. So it hurt, and it spread all down his body, to his organs, to his liver, his lungs, everywhere. It spread so incredibly fast. And eventually one day, my cousin and I were there, everyone was there, and it got so bad to the point where we called the ambulance, where he just can't take it anymore. We're going to have to put him on some sort of medication, on some sort of painkiller to just stop the pain because it's getting out of hand. So we called the ambulance, and they walk in, these big tall firefighters, never forget it. Or these, not firefighters, these, I think everyone, I think they were firefighters in like their regular drab clothing, and they didn't look like, I don't know, it was weird. I don't know what they were wearing, but they were wearing like yellow stuff. It was really weird. But they picked him up, and touching him with all that cancer throughout his skin, his bones, his muscle, it hurt so bad. And they picked him up, and he was screaming, and they had to do it carefully, and his legs were giving out. It was just awful. And they put him on the stretcher, and they pushed him they got him into the back of the ambulance, and they took him to Hendricks Hospital here in Danville, which is the Hendricks County Hospital that we have. It's really close to where I live right here. And I remember prior to that, about a week or two, when he was on hospice and everything, he had a stroke. And I think they rode in the back of the ambulance. Why do I keep saying ambulance? They rode in the back of the ambulance, him and my uncle, and it was either when he was carried from his bed on hospice, which I just mentioned, and taken to the hospital, which he died in the ambulance, or it was when he had a stroke. One of those two times, his heart stopped and he died. And my uncle said he watched him die, and they brought him back. But okay, so anyway, they took him to the hospital, and that's when it was just, he was in the hospital for I think 4 days or 5 days, and they had to clean him with sponges and scrubs. And you imagine your nerves on every inch of your body on fire because cancer has just taken over, and they'd had to wash him down, but it would just kill him. It would just absolutely kill him. The pain was just so excruciating, and watching someone go through that is just haunting. It really, really is. It's horrible. There are no words to describe how bad it was to watch it, besides it's just haunting. I remember the first weeks after he passed, it was just, I had nightmares. I remember my uncle couldn't be around. What I was mentioning earlier, my uncle couldn't live any longer in his house next to my grandpa's house because that's where he died, basically. I mean, that's where he was full of cancer. He did not want to be reminded of how his dad died, so he eventually sold his house. And I remember during that process, I stayed the night by myself. He let me at his house, my uncle's house, and that was scary because my grandpa recently passed of cancer, and just these haunting memories were just flooding me. It was not fun to go through. But so they had to wash him down, and all of his nerves were on fire because the cancer was just eating him alive. And eventually they just basically put him in a coma for the last few days of his life, and everyone in the family was gathered in that room. It was a very small room, and I remember the exact layout. And I remember you walk in, there'd be a bathroom right to the left. His bed was in the middle, TV in the top right corner, vents that people would sit on, and then no vents over here, but chairs on the right side. I remember it vividly, and you do. When you go through traumatic experiences and stuff like this, you usually remember what things look like or what things smell like. I could tell you the smell of the hospital. I could tell you my exact emotions. I could tell you how hungry I was, or because that stuff sticks with you. It stains your brain. And I remember, this is not easy to talk about. I remember, wasn't doing good, and they were watching movies, and he would wake up from the coma too, like just briefly and say hi or something and go back. He wasn't in a whole lot of pain, but I remember that the nurses actually gave us a spare room to sleep in. My cousin and I, they said, yeah, we can give you, this room's not going to be in use. It was like this old little, it wasn't really old, but there was like 2 or 3 hospital beds that they let us sleep on. And so my cousin went in there and slept on it. It was 4 in the morning. It was 4 or 5 in the morning. We weren't getting any sleep because we were too focused on our grandpa dying. And so we laid in those hospital beds. We tried to get some sleep, and we got 2 hours of sleep, I think. Sorry, you can hear you in the background. We got about 2 hours of sleep, and I finally dozed off, and then my other aunt from the other side of the family and my other uncle, they went to sleep in another hospital bed together. They both fit, and my uncle woke me up that next morning, just 2 hours later, from about 4:30 to 5, woke us up at 7-ish, about 7:30. I think it was about 7, and He woke us up and he said, "Hey boys, he passed away." And he sounded okay. He was in shock, of course, but he sounded okay for losing his dad. And he wasn't okay. I remember we all got up and my aunt started crying, and we walked down that hall back into his room, and I will never forget how he looked dead. And that's not morbid. That's not me being, man, she's really screaming. That's not me being morbid or anything, but like I said, when you go through something that traumatic, you remember what those things look like. It wasn't, I don't know what she's screaming about. It was not pleasant at all. I remember he died with his mouth open. That's pretty scary to look at. It's like something from a horror movie, and it just was not fun. It just really wasn't fun. And I remember everyone was gathered around him, and to be honest, a dead body does not look much different than a live body. You just don't see any breathing, and this was very early stages of death. I mean, he just recently passed, and it just wasn't fun to look at. And the nurses apologized greatly that he passed, and they did all that they could. And still today, I thank you, the nurses that took care of him. They did an amazing job for the time that he had left. And, you know, I remember it was all stormy that day. And when he died a few minutes later, big sun ray came shooting through the window right on him, and then clouds pulled back over. You hear that? Now that's probably just a random occurrence. I believe in God. Maybe that's a sign. But I mean, that's weather. That's random occurrences. So I don't want to say that was Jesus, because, you know. So we had his funeral, I think, a few days later, and that is really when, like, looking at a dead body is different than a human body, because they fancy the body all up and they put this stuff on their skin, kind of like makeup, and if the skin becomes waxy because of the I forget what they pump through them, the preservative to preserve the body. I'm drawing a blank, but they look kind of waxy, and I did not want to touch them because I don't have a fear of dead bodies, but I think that just, I don't know, it would have kind of freaked me out. But we had the funeral and everything went well, and people were just sad for a long, long time. So watching someone die of cancer like this, watching someone go through something this extreme is almost life-changing. And I remember I cried a little, and I didn't cry a lot, and I still to this day I don't cry. I have not cried about it. And that's not me being a cold, heartless person. Maybe that's the way I just hurt. I'm sure if I hung around him more, I would have cried more if I got to know him more. I knew him, of course. He's my grandpa. I saw him a lot. But if I saw him a lot more and talked to him more and wasn't so young, I think it would have hurt so much more. And it still does hurt. It still hurts tremendously. It was a painful thing to go through. It really, really was. Everyone mourns differently, though. And still weird without him. Drive by his house. My cousin lives at his house now, but I walk in that house and it just gives me chills. It's just not a fun thing to witness. And the pain people go through with cancer is truly remarkable. It is terrible. It is absolutely appalling. But yeah, that's what it's like, I guess. I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, you can like, comment, subscribe if you want. Again, this is one of those videos where I'm really not going to beg you to subscribe or like, because this is a serious thing. But do whatever you want. I will see you guys in the next video. Again, go to the playlist section, Storytime series, if you want to see more videos like this. I will see you guys, as always, in the next video. Bye-bye. Oh yeah, don't forget, if you like this lav mic, if I can get it off, tell me, because I'm going to keep using it. This is actually a really, really good mic. It's really good. What?